So the pineal gland, according to many, many different ancient traditions, appears to be the main access point between that astral body and the physical body. It's the physiological center that determines how psychic information gets in. As you can see here, it's in the middle of the brain, and it is shaped like a pine cone. If you look there on the right, that's a drawing of what the pineal gland looks like. It's actually upside down from where it really is in the brain. But it is a small gland. It's about the shape of a pea. It has kind of a reddish, purplish color inside the brain. And there's some interesting things about it, because when you look at these ancient traditions, we find many, many different traditions giving pine cone type examples in their literature. Now, first of all, we go to Babylon. Babylon has the legend of the primitive mountain. It is said to be the location on earth where the gods contact humanity. In sculptures of the so-called primitive mountain, it's shaped much like a pine cone, or the idea of the pineal gland. When we go into Babylonian art, we see sculptures of the god Tammuz actually holding a pine cone in his hand, as if this is a very important tool that he's using in his work, which may well be psychic. In Egypt, we have the Ben stone. Stones are often used to depict the pineal gland. You can clearly see in this image that the stone is shaped like the pineal gland. There are two serpents coming at it on either side. Those serpents are called the Uraeus, and they represent the Kundalini energy, which is believed to be coming up from the root chakra through the 33 vertebrae into the brain. And number 33, that sounds familiar, 33 vertebrae. Well, one of the things I have in the book is a quotation from Manly Palmer Hall saying that the 33 degrees of Freemasonry actually correspond to the 33 vertebrae in the spine, and that the goal of Masonry is to get the adept to awaken the pineal gland. But as we're going to see, it's not just Masonry that's doing this, it's major world religions of all different varieties. So many of them keep giving us the same metaphor. The Egyptian metaphor is also interesting because you'll notice on either side of that Ben stone are two birds. Those birds are called Bennu. But when the Bennu was translated into Greek, the word got changed to phoenix. So the phoenix is obviously the bird that dies and is reborn. It is consumed in flames, it collapses to ash, and then it is reborn out of the flames. So it appears that this is the pineal gland, and that there's a message here about this sort of astral body that's going out there, flying around. It's dying and reborn. When you go into your out-of-body experience, you're flying around in this other form. But then it dies when you come back to your physical body, only to be reborn when you have another out-of-body experience later on. In Egyptian mythology, the staff of Osiris, and we're going to meet him in a little bit here, has a pine cone on the top with the two Uraeus serpents intertwining up towards it. Again, this represents the Kundalini spiral, and those two serpents twining together, according to many scholars who are sort of on the fringe, also could represent the DNA molecule. When they spiral together, it looks like the double helix. When we see this image of King Tut, one of the gods on earth, we see the Uraeus serpents coming out of his forehead, where the pineal gland is located. The Hindu god Shiva, and I have to apologize to the internet community, I've had about 580 emails telling me it's not a goddess, it's a guy, all right? Now, when I looked at this image the first time, I said, okay, that's a pretty hot-looking babe. So, you know, I'm not gay, but let's say if that person walked up to me, started hitting on me, maybe I could be coerced. I don't know. Dude looks like a lady. That's all I'm saying, okay? So I apologize to the world that I said Shiva was a woman, because Shiva is a dude. He's just a very, very effeminate dude who wears mascara, eyeliner, has long hair, and looks hot. Okay, that's all I'm saying. So this man has this interesting hair which is stylized to look like the pineal gland. It's very obvious when you look at the image. And he has the uraeus serpents wrapped around his neck, and he has the bindi, or the third eye symbol, in between the eyebrows. Now remember, we've already gone through Babylonian tradition, Egyptian tradition. Now we're into Hinduism, which is a geographically isolated culture with exactly the same symbols. Well, now we're going over to Mesoamerica, clear on the other side of the world, and here it is again. This is Viracocha. This is the Mayan god who is the lord of the underworld. And what we're seeing is a very complex image in this sculpture where he is emerging in his face from the mouth of a serpent. The serpent, according to various scholars like John Major Jenkins, represents the galaxy, and specifically he believes there's a lot of Mayan art that says that at the end of this Mayan calendar cycle, that the ecliptic plane of the Earth, the tilt of the Earth, aligns with the center of the galaxy. It's actually perfect around 1998, but it's pretty close to 2012. So that's one of the things we have. But if you look at this image, the coils of the serpent appear to look like the pineal gland. Very, very similar. And what's even more interesting, which I don't know if you're going to be able to see it too well here, is that he has this necklace around the serpent's tongue. It's as if he's wearing a necklace, and many of the parts of the necklace appear to be pine cones with energy waves streaming into them. And I have a great picture of this in the book. We did a line art illustration of this in the book. So he's literally wearing this big necklace full of little pineal glands with energy waves shooting into them, and the whole entire structure he's in looks like a pineal gland. And of course, this was a white-skinned god in an area in which no one else had white skin. Very interesting fact. Here's another image from Mesoamerica of a sculpture in which pine cones are very prominently illustrated. Another very interesting flagging of the pineal gland, and there are others. Teotihuacan's temple has pine cones all over the place, which might be corn, but it looks an awful lot like a pine cone. It doesn't really look like corn. Now we move on into Greek tradition. They have the omphalos stone, as you see here, a very clear illustration of a pineal gland. And it is believed that the omphalos, again, is where the gods first land when they come to humanity. And it was also used by the oracles to be in contact with the gods. So the legend of the omphalos is that it is a stone that allows you to contact the gods directly. And of course, it also is symbolic of the pineal gland inside the brain, which would do the same thing. Dionysus, the Greek god of death and rebirth, also has the pine cone on the end of his staff, as you saw before. Bacchus is what he got named when he goes into Roman tradition, and he kind of gets shifted around a little bit into the god of drunkenness and revelry. But once again, it's the pineal gland, the pine cone on the top of his staff. Now we're going to go into a whole other area. We've already hit off Babylon, Hinduism, Egypt, Mesoamerica. Now we're going into Asia, and we're looking at Buddhism. And Buddha's hair is stylized like a pineal gland, just like we saw with the god Shiva. And he also has the bindi, the third eye, once again. You go over to Ireland, another geographically isolated region, and they have this Turo stone, which again is shaped just like everything else. The pineal gland, and it appears to have flickering stylized flames across its surface. Now there are many, many coins that have been minted that have images of the omphalos or the pineal gland stylized as a stone, and there's many of them to choose from. I'm just going to give you a couple. This one is from Greece, and it actually has the uraeus serpent surrounding the omphalos, which is that which contacts the gods. Roman tradition has many, many pictures of this same stone, except in Roman tradition, it gets renamed from omphalos to betel. And it's a little funny because the AE is kind of pronounced E, so it's more like beetle. Now, interestingly enough, this appears to be the derivative of Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus. The birthplace of Jesus, the Christ consciousness, it's a metaphor through the betel in the mind, through the pineal gland. That's how the Christ consciousness is awakened. And here on a Roman coin, we have the eagle symbolizing the phoenix, the Bennu bird, when you go back to the Egyptian sculpture, and the Egyptian painting I showed you. The Bennu bird is here, the eagle, not the phoenix, and he's poised on top of that betel stone. Well, the Romans also did something else very interesting with the betel stone. This is all historically documented. I'm not making this up. They stylized the betel stone as if it were a pyramid. Now that's interesting. The betel became a pyramid. And if you look there on the bottom, one of those pyramids has a capstone on it. There's a clear line of demarcation, and the top is a capstone. And on the other side of many of these coins would be the winged god. And in another example, we have a Roman coin with the betel on one side and the eagle on the other. Now, if this is all starting to sound curiously familiar, you're right. Because the Great Seal of the United States has the eagle on one side, and then it has the pyramid on the other. Just like we see in Roman coins. The eagle is another symbol of the gods, which in some cases they actually drew the gods. The betel, the third eye, the pineal gland, got stylized to become a stone and then became a pyramid with the capstone on it. But this is a Roman coin that's now reiterated on American currency. So what's going on here? That third eye on top of the pyramid could very well be the third eye in the brain. Could be the opened pineal gland. So is there a hidden message in this symbol? I'm going to get into that very soon. So all this Roman tradition, I'm showing you Greek coins, Roman coins, it's very clear that there's been this pineal gland tradition that stayed true for long periods of time. And of course, you remember me talking in the 2012 Enigma about the Vatican, which has this Court of the Pine Cone, this massive bronze sculpture. One of the largest sculptures in the Vatican is a big, gigantic pine cone. And look at those birds on either side of the pine cone. Those are the Bennu birds, the Egyptian phoenix birds, symbolizing the transmutation of the soul that is possible when you awaken your pineal gland. And they have the open sarcophagus in front of that pine cone, which symbolizes a time where there will be no more death. You can clearly see someone posing in front of this sculpture, how massive in size it is. And of course, along the bottom, we have these two Egyptian-style Sphinx-type lions who are lying on top of a pedestal that has Egyptian hieroglyphics on it. So for this to be seen in the Vatican should be scandalous, but nobody seems to look at it any differently. Now here's something new. This is a sculpture, a photograph of a sculpture that is in the Court of the Pine Cone. If you look on the right, you see a big hollow space inside the building. And inside that hollow space is the pineal gland sculpture, the Court of the Pine Cone. There's the bronze pine cone, right? But then to the left, in the middle of the court, is this massive bronze sculpture. Look at the people standing around it. You can see it's like 3 times the height of a person. It's massive in size. And it looks like an eye. But there's something interesting about this eye, isn't there? It's got a vertically slit pupil. It's a reptilian eye. Well, that's kind of interesting. Now here it is up close. You can see what appears to be all this machinery inside of it, as if it's the gears of the cosmos turning. There's a lot of things that are suggested by this sculpture. It includes the idea of bodies in collision, perhaps ancient times where planets collided with other planets, maybe making what we now know as the asteroid belt, which is apparently one of the legends that the gods had, is what's the real nature of the asteroid belt. But you also see what appears to be the gears on the interior sphere are at a 90-degree angle to the gears on the exterior sphere. Now, why would that be significant? Well, in all these hyperdimensional physics models in which you look into higher dimensions, they always say that the higher dimensions are at a 90-degree right angle turn away from the dimensions in our reality. Now, that's obviously ludicrous, because you can go anywhere in space you want and make a right angle turn. You're still going to be in space. You're not going to suddenly wink off into a higher dimension. But that's the prevailing model, and that appears to be part of what this is intended to tell you. Your pineal gland is a gateway to higher dimensions that you access with your consciousness. In the Vatican, you have these obelisks with the Christian crucifix apologetically included at the top. So they're clearly borrowing from these ancient Egyptian mythologies, showing that there's an obsession with this stuff, right on up through the staff that the Pope himself is holding, which has an unambiguous pine cone right above the part where his hand is, and below the part where Jesus is, representing again the Christ consciousness. And Jesus is on a tree, representing the world tree, this consciousness field that we're all a part of, all the branches of the tree connecting everyone's minds together and connecting us out to the universe. Well, that pine cone seems to symbolize the Pope's mind being in direct contact with that Christed awareness, with that higher consciousness. And even in the Bible, just so that Christians don't feel left out, there are some absolutely obvious quotes from Jesus that clearly indicate that he was aware of the pineal gland and how important it is to any spiritual path, including the positive, loving awakening of consciousness that he was trying to teach us. In the book of Matthew, Jesus says, "The light of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye be single, your whole body shall be full of light." And that's chapter 6, verse 22 in the book of Matthew. If your eye be single, your whole body shall be full of light. It doesn't mean that you got to poke one of your eyes out in order to become psychic. It's saying that when your pineal gland opens, your body becomes enlightened and aware. Jesus always was speaking in parables, so this is a hidden metaphor for the pineal gland. Well, let's not leave out Islam, the Muslims. Here is an illustration of Mecca and this building that you see with massive numbers of people around it in the middle of a pilgrimage. Now, the building is normally covered by black curtains, as you see here. Occasionally, what they do during these pilgrimages is they will actually lift up the curtain, which is a very interesting symbolic metaphor for the awakening of the psychic mind, the awakening of the consciousness of the adept, peeling away the veil. Well, do they go any further than that with the metaphor? Absolutely. What you're seeing now is a cutaway diagram of what's actually inside that building. Okay, well, it just looks like there's a tile floor, not too much to see, 3 pillars. That's all fine and good, and there could be all kinds of symbolism there, but specifically what I'm interested in is at the very bottom of this illustration. If you look carefully on this illustration, you can see at the very bottom that there is what appears to be an eye, but it's tilted vertically. Inside this metal sculpture is the Kaaba stone, the actual piece of black stone that is believed to be an extraterrestrial artifact in Islam. And people go up on their pilgrimage and they kiss the stone. The holster apparently was built around it in order to keep the pieces from falling apart because the stone actually cracked. The whole reason why everybody goes to Mecca is they circumambulate around this building, meaning they walk around it in circles, they go up to the stone and they kiss the stone. And as you can very clearly see, it is a stylized third eye, clearly indicating that the Arabs also believed that the trick to Muhammad's abilities, to Jesus' abilities, Jesus is seen as a master teacher in Islam, is the awakening of the pineal gland. But you're only going to get this in advanced Islamic mysticism like the Sufism tradition. That's where they get into the pineal gland awakening. And of course, the Freemasons also borrowed from Sufism, which is why when you get up to the 32nd, 33rd degrees, you become a Shriner, and they have those funny little fez caps on. And the fez cap is taken right out of Sufism. So this legend of the pineal gland is worldwide. It's infused through all these different religions, all these different traditions keep showing us the same thing.